Hi, thanks for joining us today. I'm Laurie White with Community Farm Alliance. I'm here with Myrisa Christy from KCARD, and we are going to tell you a little bit about the USDA Value-Added Producer Grant opportunity that is open right now, and applications are due May 16th, which is not far away, and you need to really start thinking about it if you think this is something you might go for.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. It's just under a month away, and it is a bear of a grant. You're looking at between 60 and 80 hours of work. And I'm not saying that to scare you, it's true. But let's just dive right in. So what does the USDA mean when they say value added in this? The main three ways that we see producers add value is a change in physical state. So it has to be an irreversible change in physical state. And honestly, you can think about jam can't go back into being strawberries, but any irreversible change. So if you dice tomatoes and they're worth more diced, you can't put a tomato back together. And if you make a steer into ground beef, that is also irreversible. So the other way is locally produced agricultural food. It has to be a food product. According to the USDA, local is within 400 miles. What you have to make sure of on this one is that you're getting more money for the product because it is considered local. So $1.30 for those tomatoes instead of 80 cents. The last way that we see pretty frequently is actually produced in a manner that enhances value. And where we see this is labels such as organic, humane, heirloom, heritage, ASH-free, grass-fed, anything like that, that there's a manner that it is produced. So for example, instead of $5 for that ground beef, maybe you can get $7. And those are the main ways that we see people add value. There's two others we don't see very often, which are renewable energy, but there's another better grant for that, and segregated from the rest of your products, but that's not something that we see very frequently.
So one thing you need to know about this is that every project under a value-added producer grant has to demonstrate two things for the producer. It has to increase your customer base, and it has to increase the amount of revenue. So, this has to be demonstrated in your application that both of these things are going to happen because of your proposed project. And so one thing that you can kind of key to understanding this is that it's not going to pay you to do things that you're already doing. It has to be new things, new customer base, new revenue.
That's right. Now, if we haven't scared you off yet about saying that you have to do something new, it's going to take you 60 to 80 hours, and it's due on May 16th. These are the first steps you need to take. Get registered at sam.gov. Make sure and type it directly into your browser, not in your browser, but into your address bar, because there are lots of websites out there that mimic sam.gov. Sam.gov is completely free. You want to go not just get registered, but go all the way through, until you get your cage code and expiration date. You'll get a thing called a UEI, which means unique entity ID along the way. If you get stuck at any point, KCARD has literally walked over 100 people through this. Call us to review the idea. We have walked 100 people through Value-Added Producer Grant and probably discussed it with twice as many at least. We can help you understand eligible expenses if you run into issues with sam.gov, and we can provide you with a third-party business plan free of charge. It will be your business plan that you help us create, but we can do those things. And the other thing we encourage people is to go ahead. You'll see later when we talk about the different parts of the application, but letters of support do get you points here, but we're not talking about letters from your judge executive or your favorite congressman. We're talking about if you're purchasing something from another producer, if you need to buy a couple of extra steers, if you have someone processing your beef, so your processor, you can get a letter of support from them that they can handle and welcome the extra capacity. Or if you had someone like was going to help you get a gap audit for your vegetable farm or something along those lines, like technical assistance, that's letters of support. That's 10 easy points to get, but you're going to have to start helping people get these letters signed for you early. So thinking that through, if you're still interested, here is a few things on the eligibility side.
So this is just a quick run through of like, are you doing these things? Then you might be eligible. So first of all, do you have a project that is going to add value to your product? And then if your proposed value add is that marketing a local product, that has to be a food item. It can't be other commodities. And this next part about the raw commodity is what puts the producer in value-added producer grant, because you actually have to be producing the raw commodity. This is the producer only grant. And you can't just be buying the commodity from your neighbors for this project. You have to be producing at least 51% of what's going to go into the value-added product. You have to own the product from production through processing till it reaches the consumer. So you can't, like with milk, you can't sell your raw milk and have it processed and then buy a back product to sell. You have to own it all the way through the production process. And then you have to be able to provide match. This is a one-to-one match. And we will talk more about how you can do that match for this grant in just a minute.
So, all right, you've watched this far. You think that you're eligible. You want to know what you might get to spend money on. So one of the things that we see a lot of times, especially people adding value by changing the physical state, is they need processing expenses. It costs a lot, whether it's paying a processor to process your hog into more sausage and bacon, or increasing the number of hogs you process a year, or you need to hire some more people to help you make more jam because it's a labor intensive process. So it will pay for processing expenses. It will also pay for marketing expenses, including everything from helping with a website to new logos and branding, to actually hiring a marketing person or customer service or salesperson that goes out into the region and helps market your product. You can pay for their time, their mileage, all those sorts of things. And said you have to produce 51% of the project, but if you need to buy a little from your neighbors, that's fine. It can cover some of those expenses as well. Paying new employees, like hiring a marketer or hiring labor, is great, but it needs to be something that you all are ready for. And if someone has prepared you a business plan, it needs to be in the business plan with that reflected in the financials, so that it is something that you're really going to do. Because if you write a grant for that and you're not able to hire someone, then you've just spent 60 to 80 hours of your time for not much fun. So make sure you're ready.
Now, it's also good to keep in mind not just what you can spend money on, but what you can't spend money on with this grant. So one guideline is that this grant will not pay for anything that is pre-harvest. So you can't buy plants, seed, you can't pay for harvest labor. It's only for expenses that take place after harvest. It will not pay for any permanent facilities, either building, improving, or repairing them. So you can't like build a commercial kitchen with it. You can not pay for either your own raw commodity or for your producer family labor, but both of those can count towards your match requirement in this grant, but you can't use them, you can't pay for those with the grant funds. And then fixed equipment. So this is defined as equipment that is useful for more than 1 year and valued at more than $5,000. Now, smaller things that are less valued than that would count as supplies in a lot of cases, and that can include office equipment, computers, smaller pieces of processing or packaging equipment like a label maker or a vacuum sealer, things that are smaller pieces of equipment under $5,000 or that are that won't last longer than a year, like packaging materials and supplies.
Yeah, we see a lot of people use the money for extra packaging materials and supplies. So, so you're still with us. So ways to apply. No one wants to spend a year planning, but a great way to use this grant is if you have an idea that costs more than $25,000 to implement, then get a feasibility study to see if it's going to work out. and it will pay for up to half of the feasibility study. In kind on that's a little shadier, but that can be up to $75,000. And if it looks feasible and you get a feasibility study, a business plan, a marketing plan, those nice things that go with a feasibility study, it makes it a lot easier to come over here to the second category, which is called working capital grants, which is where the big money is, up to $250,000. A lot of time, the emerging market grants are when you have produced and marketed a product for less than 2 years. So for you, that's an emerging market. You don't have as much experience. You have to have a feasibility plan and a business study. But a market, if you're going to go for more than $50,000 up to the 250. For market expansion grants, which means that you have produced the product and marketed it for at least 2 years, then you still have to have a business or marketing plan, but you don't have to have the feasibility study. We have a lot of people who've been farming between, 4 and 10 years that come in this door because they've been making their product or producing it in an enhanced manner for a few years. And so they have the experience to do it without a feasibility study. If you just really need to just get over the hump and you want to spend up to $49,999 government dollars, this is where the simplified grant comes in. However, it is scored the same as if you had a business plan. So that's the reason to take, if you have a resource to get a business plan completed, like KCARD or another resource, it can still help you score higher, but it has to be less than $50,000 for the federal government. There are limitations on all of these. So I'll let Laurie explain some of that.
So a couple of things to keep in mind, that this is a dollar for dollar match grant. So for every federal dollar you're asking for, you are providing a dollar in match, which can be a combination of in-kind and cash. If you're going to apply for more than $50,000, you must have a third-party business plan. And for some of those, you also need a feasibility study. Oh yeah, here. So if you haven't marketed that product for at least 2 years, then you need that feasibility study. So some requirements in place there.
Yeah, it does make it a little more intimidating, and the application itself is around 60 pages long before you include the federal forms. So if you've gotten your sam.gov and you've talked to KCARD or someone else about their project and it looks eligible and you're working your business plan, what's the actual application made of? Well, there's a few federal forms from the standard SF 424 family, but there's an application template that you can find online on USDA Rural Development's website, or we have it. Laurie and I both have it. Everybody at KCARD has it. It's the templates. And so the thing to keep in mind is how these are scored. We'll go over it with you, like which sections apply to you and which don't, because not all 58 of those pages are going to apply to you. As a matter of fact, probably about a quarter of the things on the paper. It will help you figure out which box to check and which you should not. This is something we've been doing for a while. The nature of the proposed venture, you're going to hear me talk about the expansion of customer base and increased farmer revenue. That's like the key thing about this grant. They want to see farmers get more money. And describing how you're going to do that, how you're going to expand the customer base, how it's financially feasible, how farmers are going to get more revenue, all that it's you have a processing facility, all of those things. If you need one, that's worth 30 points of the grant. There's 80 possible points just in the template itself. There's some other points that we'll get into if you apply for the grant. So that's 30. That's a lot. So you should put a lot of effort there. Fortunately, a lot of your business plan can help support writing that section. The project personnel is 20 points that we often see people not use as well as they should, because you've got to talk about yourself and your expertise and the expertise of the people who are going to be applying for the grant or going to be working with you on the grant project. So that's 20 points. The work plan and budget, which is where everybody gets caught up, it's 20 points. It's a quarter of it. So it's a lot. But you have to make sure and flesh that out really well in a way that makes sense and that it's logical and that a reviewer can follow it. We actually recommend people only have 2, maybe 3 activities, because too many more than that, and it starts getting hard to keep track of, both for a reviewer standpoint and if you get the grant. And the last place that it's one of the best ways to just get 10 out of those 80 points is commitments and support. Laurie talked about getting those letters of support if you're purchasing from another farmer, if you have a processor that you're using, if you have a commercial kitchen that you're using, if somebody's going to be doing a gap audit for you, if you know that you're going to be using somebody to do a soil test or any other technical assistance, getting 5 or 6 of those letters can help make sure you get points. Match justification is part of the template. A lot of times you're going to need bank paperwork, or at least to go through the Bureau of Labor Statistics or another reputable source on how to value your match. And so Laurie has a nice little graphic and description of how you value, how you have match.
So we've talked about this as a one-to-one. You have to have $1 for every federal $1. But one of the nice things about this particular grant is that a lot of your match can be made up with in-kind. So up to 25% of your match can be made up of producer and family labor. Now, we said this, that you can't pay for producer family labor, but you can count it towards your contribution to the project. Now, that has to be valued fairly according to the labor statistics, and you will have to track that labor and report it. Then the other, so that can be half of your match, up to 25% of the total project budget. The other half of your match can come from a couple of different sources. Additional in-kind possibility is the value of your own raw commodity. And this has to be at fair market value. So if you're contributing your product, your raw milk, your produce that's going into CSA boxes, your livestock that's going to get processed into finished meat, that the value of that raw commodity can count as part of your match. Other things that will count towards match are cash, which will be demonstrated by bank statements, or a line of credit that you could have verified by a letter from your bank or your creditor. And then the other half of the project budget would be made up with the federal funds that you're requesting.
Yeah, one of the first conversations we always have with people is to make sure they have match, because it's a heck of a lot of work. So if Laurie and I have not scared you off by now, we have T-minus less than a month before this thing is due, and this thing comes out pretty regularly every year. So if you don't think you can make it this year, I don't care. Contact us, see if we can get it done. KCARD's number is 859-550-3972. And you see my email address there and Laurie's email address. She is growing increasingly good at explaining this program. So thank you very much. And Laurie, thank you, Laurie, Laurie actually made sure we got this video done today. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the collaboration we've had across the state to get the word out about this funding.